At Christmas, while the room buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the faint hum of carols, my mother ripped the mask off my life. She had been snooping. Again. This time she stumbled across bank documents I thought were buried deep in my briefcase. Her eyes widened, her breath hitched, and then silence. The kind of silence that feels like the whole world is waiting to see who gets gutted first. Then she said it. Out loud. In front of my father, my sister, her perfect little entourage, "You're a billionaire?" The room spun. My sister's jaw dropped, her eyes gleaming with entitlement. And then came the demand. My mom didn't congratulate me, didn't ask how I built it, didn't even pretend to care. She demanded, no, decreed, that I hand over half of it. To my golden sister. The same sister who never lifted a finger, who bathed in privilege, who lived off my exhaustion. And in that instant, I knew Christmas wasn't family, it was war. Before we dive into the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching this from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it helps me connect with you all around the world. My name is Michael. I'm 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've carried a secret double life. To my family, I was just the quiet son who worked with computers. That's all they ever wanted to know, vague, dismissive, never curious. To them, my work was boring, unimportant, maybe even pathetic compared to the bright halo they hung around my sister. But the truth was far more staggering than they could imagine. Over the past decade, I had built something monumental. A tech company that started in my cramped apartment, grew into a powerhouse, and eventually sold for more than I thought a single human being could ever touch. I reinvested, diversified, and by the end of last year, the math was undeniable. My net worth crossed $1.1 billion. That number wasn't just money. It was sleepless nights, years of rejection, and scars no one in my family ever saw. And I kept it hidden, because I knew exactly what would happen if they found out. Especially my sister, Emily. Emily was the golden child, always was, always would be. She could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. Every stumble was excused, every demand indulged, every spotlight tilted her way. She was adored for existing, while I was tolerated for performing. If I failed, I was weak. If I succeeded, it was ignored, or worse, harvested for her benefit. I learned early on that recognition in our family wasn't about merit. It was about favoritism. That's why I told no one. Not when my company cleared its first million. Not when I signed the contracts that freed me from ever needing to work again. Not even when I crossed into billionaire territory. They didn't deserve to know. And yet, on Christmas Eve, the secret was torn from me. The living room smelled of cinnamon and cloves, the fireplace crackling against the hush of falling snow outside. My father sipped whiskey in his armchair. Emily sat prim and radiant in the center of the room, holding court with her stories of trivial triumphs. My mother hovered at her side like a satellite orbiting its sun. And me? I was quiet, as always, sitting off to the side, a glass of wine in hand. In my bag, tucked away behind the couch, I carried documents. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't trust holiday shipping for papers that important. They were end-of-year reports from my lawyers and financial advisors. And then, my mother snooped. I don't know when she slipped away. Maybe when I stepped outside to take a phone call. But when I came back inside, my blood froze. She was standing in the center of the room, her hands trembling, her face red, holding my documents in plain view. The silence was brutal. My father stared. Emily leaned forward, her eyes wide, hungry, calculating, and then my mother's voice cracked through the stillness. "Michael, you're a billionaire?" The word shattered the night. It didn't land like awe, it landed like accusation. Like betrayal. My chest tightened, my pulse hammering. I didn't even get a chance to speak before her face twisted into something hard, something cold, something I had seen many times before. "You've been hiding this. From us? From your family?" And then, like a verdict, it came. "You will give half of it to Emily. She deserves it. She's your sister. You don't need it all." Her voice was final, demanding, as though my years of sacrifice, the billion-dollar empire, the pain, the work, none of it mattered. All that mattered was that their golden child was fed. And in that moment, I realized Christmas had just turned into the battlefield I always knew it would be. When people hear golden child, they think it's about gifts, extra presents under the tree, a slightly larger slice of cake, a pat on the head. That's not what it was with Emily. With Emily, it was structural. It was policy. It was the house rule written in invisible ink across every calendar, every bank statement, every conversation. She got grace, I got conditions. She got applause for breathing. I got silence for bleeding. The pattern started early. 3rd grade, my first A in math. I brought home the worksheet, stars and stickers exploding across the top. My father smiled, reached for the magnet shaped like a blue fish, and clipped it to the fridge. By dinner, it was gone. Replaced by Emily's most improved ribbon from tumbling class. Mom's explanation was soft and final: your success speaks for itself. Emily needs the encouragement. It was the first time I learned that my achievements were storage items, kept in a drawer, taken out when convenient, promptly tucked away if they interfered with the shrine. Middle school blurred into high school, and the ledger got thicker. I bought my first computer at 14 with money from mowing lawns and repairing neighbors' printers. Emily, 16 at the time, borrowed it the night before my regional coding competition. I found it the next morning, battery dead, keyboard sticky from soda, my practice files deleted to make room for a photo dump from her cheer banquet. Mom's verdict: you're good at rebuilding things, Michael. Emily needed it more. I remember the timestamp, Saturday, 6:14 a.m. because I took a photo of the blank directory structure out of reflex, as if evidence could sway a court that would never convene. Money followed the same gravity. At 17, I'd saved $3,420.17 in a passbook account, tips from fixing wireless routers, from installing antivirus, from explaining algebra to kids who didn't want to learn it. 2 days after Emily crashed Mom's car at a Halloween party, I logged in to check the balance. 17 cents. The rest had been temporarily borrowed for the deductible and the inconvenience of losing transportation. I printed the transaction history on the library machine. November 3, 4:12 p.m., debit to family expense, authorized. I didn't authorize it. Mom kissed my forehead, thanked me for being the responsible one, and told me I could always make it back. Emily cried into a tea towel while Dad patted her shoulder like she'd survived a war. That's how it worked. Emily detonated. I swept. College was the first time I escaped the orbit. I left on a scholarship with a refurbished ThinkPad and a box fan. Mom wanted me to room with family friends who had a track record of needing help with projects, read, free tech support, and I lied. I said the dorm lottery assigned me elsewhere. Freedom looked like fluorescent library lights at 1:23 a.m., like black coffee, like scraping bugs out of scripts until they ran clean. My first real product, a lightweight monitoring demon for small businesses, started as a dorm whisper, 2 cron jobs and some bash glue. By junior year, I'd sold a license to a local dental practice for $600 and used the money to buy Emily a birthday gift because Mom said it would be nice. I shipped her a pair of white sneakers she'd circled in a magazine. She posted a photo: "Thanks Mom and Dad for the best brother ever." The comment thread was a museum of entitlement. I archived it anyway. You don't realize how much you've been trained until you stop performing the routine. After graduation, I joined a tiny security startup as employee number 7. We ate ramen, laughed at graphs that dipped like cliff faces, and celebrated server uptimes like infant milestones. I was promoted to lead after we survived a 2 a.m. breach attempt trace to an IP block in Bucharest, June 18, 2:41 and 9 seconds UTC, Gink's logs spilling like confetti. The adrenaline felt like purpose. Mom called that afternoon to tell me Emily was thinking of trying her hand at lifestyle blogging and needed a small launch fund. I said I couldn't help. She replied with that gentle, weaponized disappointment: "I thought family came first." I checked the time, 14:32 Eastern, and wrote it down in my notebook like a symptom. Then came the first big inflection. I left to build my own thing, modular telemetry for cloud workloads with compression that made the metrics bill blink twice. I called it Rune. It wasn't flashy, it was quiet, efficient, surgical. A friend from the startup days, Priya, introduced me to an angel who didn't mind that my pitch deck looked like a sysadmin's dream journal. The seed hit my account on April 3 at 9:07 and 13 seconds. I didn't tell my parents. I told the product. I told the code. We grew like ivy, slow at first, then everywhere. Freemium to paid, pilot to enterprise, a contract with a logistics firm whose CTO signed at 17:56 on a Friday with "My wife will kill me if I keep delaying this." I stapled that email to the wall. Meanwhile, Emily's gravity reached across state lines. She launched, rebranded, relaunched, pivoted. Each time she posted a pastel grid of new beginnings, Mom organized a family group chat to applause. When I shipped v1.6.4 with agentless collectors and reduced CPU overhead by 13%, I got a thumbs up emoji and "proud of you, honey, can you review Emily's media kit? You're so good with computers." I sent edits at 1:12. She replied at 14:03, "Ugh, the fonts are boring." Mom, Michael, don't be negative. The fights got slicker in my 30s. They sounded like boundaries, assumptions, fairness. What they meant was the same as always: Emily first, you second. 2 summers ago, she asked me to co-sign a lease for a loft with good light for content. I said no. Mom left a voicemail that still lives in my archive: your sister's dreams should matter to you as much as your code. Timestamp, July 22, 1947. Transcript attached. Classification tag, guilt. Rune hit escape velocity the following winter. We didn't look like a unicorn, we looked like a steel tool that every operator wanted and nobody noticed until it wasn't there. An acquisition offer arrived with digits that made my cheeks go numb. I negotiated, signed, and built protections, the trusts, the governance, the clauses that kept my soul from being part of the purchase. On paper, I became the thing people pointed in headlines. In person, I bought the same coffee, wore the same hoodie, took the same late-night walks past the server colo we still rented out of habit. That's the part my mother refuses to understand. Wealth is not applause. It's paperwork. It's risk. It's traceable decisions laid end-to-end like a minefield. I learned to treat every transaction like a photograph: date, time, location, who touched it, who looked away. Not because I was paranoid. Because I was trained. So when Christmas arrived and she found my documents, it wasn't just exposure, it was proof that the rule she wrote into me as a kid, Emily first, was about to be enforced at a scale none of us had words for. She didn't gasp because her son had done something extraordinary. She gasped because she'd discovered a reservoir she believed she had rights to. And Emily, my mother's son, merely tilted her face to warm herself in it. People think golden child is a metaphor. It isn't. It's an accounting system. It's debt carried on someone else's books. And on Christmas, my mother tried to collect. People think becoming a billionaire looks like fireworks, confetti, champagne bottles, headlines exploding across screens. For me, it was the opposite. It was quiet. Clinical. A PDF attachment in an encrypted email with 3 signatures at the bottom. A balance sheet that stared back at me in black and white, the commas and the number lined up like soldiers. No celebration. No applause. Just a realization that my life had crossed a border most people never even see on the horizon. I didn't tell anyone. Not friends. Not coworkers. And especially not my family. Because wealth doesn't just draw attention, it draws expectation, obligation, and worst of all, entitlement. And if there's one thing my family, particularly my mother and Emily, excelled at, it was entitlement. I built everything in silence. Rune, my company, was my cathedral of code. From the outside, it looked simple: monitoring and telemetry software, another brick in the endless wall of enterprise tools. But the genius was under the hood. Lightweight, efficient, impossible to replace once integrated. It didn't scream. It whispered. And in tech, the tools that whisper are the ones that burrow into infrastructure so deep that pulling them out feels like amputating an organ. I remember the day it all shifted. January 14, 9:42 a.m., I was staring at a graph, one of ours, that showed a multinational client had onboarded 17,000 new instances in less than 2 hours. That wasn't just adoption. That was addiction. By March, my inbox was a siege of inquiries, from venture capitalists, from system architects, from CTOs who wanted a quick chat that never was. Then came the acquisition offers. They started at 8 figures, ballooned to 9, and finally hit 10. The number that made me step back from my monitor, close my eyes, and feel the room tilt. 10 digits. Signed, notarized, wired. I didn't say yes immediately. I negotiated. Every clause mattered. Non-compete periods, IP retention, profit sharing, transition timelines. I treated it like war, because that's what it was, a battle over ownership of what I had bled for. When the deal closed, I didn't pop champagne. I archived the email, downloaded the final contracts, stored them on 3 encrypted drives, and took a long walk at 2:13 a.m. through a city that didn't know it had just minted a billionaire in its shadows. The night air tasted metallic, like something I couldn't swallow. And still, I told no one. Because my family didn't celebrate my victories. They scavenged them. Every dollar I'd earned before this had been twisted, siphoned, justified as something shared. Emily's first car? Paid for with the savings I'd worked for in high school. Her deposit on an apartment she wasn't ready to manage alone? Cleared from my account under the label family support. Even the sneakers she posted about in college had been a reallocation of my small success. If they did that with hundreds, what would they do with billions? So I compartmentalized. I set up trusts in Delaware, a holding company in Singapore, diversified assets through Luxembourg. I treated my fortune like a covert operation, layering it in paperwork and time zones until even I had to map it out to see the whole picture. Not because I was paranoid. Because I was trained to survive extraction. And yet, despite all the precautions, the secret never felt safe. I carried it in my chest like contraband. Family dinners became landmines, every question about my work, every casual "so how's the company doing?" felt like a probe. I learned to deflect, to laugh it off, to play dumb. It's complicated. We're just steady. Nothing flashy. Lies, but protective ones. I thought I was in control. I thought the layers would shield me. But secrets have gravity. And eventually, they pull. Christmas was that pull. My mother's snooping wasn't random. It was instinct, honed over decades of prying, demanding, taking. She had always sniffed out resources, always found a way to redirect them toward Emily. This time, she just hit gold instead of pennies. $1 billion gold. And in that moment, when she held the papers in her hand, when her voice cracked with accusation instead of pride, I understood something I had never admitted to myself. I hadn't been hiding the money out of modesty. I had been hiding it because deep down, I knew they would try to steal it. And I had been right. Because the first words out of her mouth weren't congratulations. They were a command. A redistribution order. Half to Emily, as though a decade of sacrifice, of missed birthdays, of 20-hour coding marathons, of 2 a.m. security breaches, of bloodshot eyes staring at graphs until the numbers blurred, meant nothing. As though my billion-dollar empire was just another branch of the family's checking account. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't going to end with a conversation. This was going to end with evidence. With exposure. With justice. Christmas wasn't the end of my secret. It was the beginning of the reckoning. The moment the words left my mother's mouth, half of it goes to Emily, something inside the room shifted. It wasn't just a demand. It was a sentence, delivered like law. My father said nothing. He sat in his chair, glass of bourbon half raised, eyes drifting between me and my mother like he was watching a match he couldn't referee. Emily didn't argue. She didn't protest. She just leaned back, lips parting into a smug, knowing smile, as if she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. And the pressure began. "Michael," my mother said, her tone sharp but dressed in faux reason. "You can't possibly need that much money. Emily is struggling. She's trying to build her brand, her future. Family supports family. That's what we do." The irony almost made me laugh. Family supports family unless the family was me. I stayed quiet, letting the words echo. That was my first mistake. Silence, in our household, was always treated as consent. My mother seized it like oxygen. "Think of all the times we've helped you," she continued. "Roof over your head. Food on the table. We made sacrifices for you. Don't you think it's time you give back?" My jaw tightened. Sacrifices? I remembered the bank account emptied to fix Emily's wrecked car, the temporary loans that never returned, the birthdays skipped because she needed the spotlight. Their sacrifices had always been a ledger written in reverse. But Emily leaned forward, feigning humility, playing her part. "I mean, I don't want to take anything from you, Michael," she said, her voice sugary, calculated. "But Mom's right. You've always been good with money, and I've never had that gift. Imagine what I could do if I just had a little help. Half would set me up forever." Half. She said it so easily, like it was a fair split of groceries, not the pillaging of an empire. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, but I could feel my pulse in my throat. "No." The room froze. "No?" my mother repeated, as though I had spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean, no?" "Michael, don't be selfish. You have more than you'll ever spend. Emily deserves her share." "Her share?" I asked, staring directly at her. "Of what she didn't build? Of what she didn't work for? Of what she didn't even know existed until 5 minutes ago?" The mask cracked. For a moment, my mother's face twisted into something raw, ugly, primal. "You owe us," she snapped. "Without us, you wouldn't be who you are. Without this family, you'd be nothing." There it was. The truth beneath the performance. This wasn't about fairness. This was about ownership. She saw me as an extension of Emily. My worth was measured by what could be stripped from me and given to her. The argument spiraled. My mother listed every expense they'd ever covered for me, as if raising me had been an investment with interest now due. Emily chimed in with subtle digs, how she never asked for much, how she deserved a chance. My father muttered something about keeping the peace but never once told them to stop. The walls seemed to close in, the fire crackling louder, the ornaments on the tree reflecting warped faces back at me. I could feel the weight of expectation pressing down, the air in the room thick with entitlement. That night didn't end with a resolution. It ended with ultimatums. My mother made it clear, I was to think it over and do the right thing, which in her dictionary meant surrender. Emily hugged me goodbye, her arms stiff, her perfume sickly sweet, whispering, "We'll sort this out. I know you'll come around." But I wasn't coming around. Because as I drove home through the snow, headlights cutting across empty roads, one thought looped in my mind, sharp and unrelenting. This wasn't pressure. This was extortion. And if they wanted a war for my fortune, they had just declared it. I've learned in life that betrayal rarely comes as a surprise. It's usually foreshadowed by smaller trespasses, acts so routine, so normalized, that you almost stop noticing them. My mother's snooping was like that. A lifetime of opening doors without knocking, rifling through drawers she had no business touching, reading letters not addressed to her. As a kid, I thought it was normal. As an adult, I realized it was surveillance. But Christmas night, when she paraded my financial documents in front of the family, I understood something deeper. This wasn't just curiosity. It was strategy. I replayed the scene over and over during the drive home, every detail sharpened by rage. The documents had been in my bag, zipped, folded inside a sealed envelope. For her to find them, she had to unzip, rifle, and deliberately extract. That wasn't an accident. That was intent. And it meant that, at some point during the evening, she'd watched me leave the room, calculated the window of opportunity, and struck. The more I thought about it, the more I realized, this wasn't the first time. I remembered freshman year of high school, when my personal journal mysteriously ended up on the kitchen table, open to a page where I'd written about feeling invisible compared to Emily. My mother scolded me for being dramatic, but I hadn't shown her the notebook. She'd taken it. I remembered my college acceptance letter, which arrived by FedEx. I hadn't even slit the envelope when she waltzed into my room waving it like a trophy, already opened, already read. And of course, the passbook bank account. The way she knew the exact balance. The way she claimed the withdrawal was for the family, as though my sweat-soaked earnings from mowing lawns and fixing routers belonged to her. This wasn't curiosity. This was a pattern. A compulsion to know, to control, to reallocate. So on Christmas, she simply followed the script she'd written decades earlier. Only this time, the stakes weren't a journal, a letter, or a few $1,000s. This time, it was an empire. And I had proof. Because when I got home that night, still trembling from the confrontation, I opened my laptop and checked the timestamp logs on my secure cloud drive. I had synced those documents from my attorney's office at 14:17 and 9 seconds that afternoon. By 1942, they'd been pulled from my bag and waved around like contraband. That 5-hour window was my breadcrumb trail, undeniable evidence that the only way they surfaced at Christmas was through deliberate invasion. But I needed more. Patterns are persuasive, but evidence is in the details. So I started reconstructing her history of snooping like an investigator rebuilding a crime scene. I pulled up archived emails where my mother referenced things I hadn't told her, texts where she seemed to know before being told, transactions she justified with knowledge she shouldn't have had. Each one was a piece of a mosaic. January 7, 2012, 23:09, email to me, "Don't forget your midterm is Thursday. You should be studying." I never told her about that exam. She must have read the syllabus I left on my desk. August 14, 2016, 16:22, voicemail, "I saw the balance on your card is low, do you need help?" I never gave her access to that account. She must have intercepted a statement. March 29, 2020, 11:48, text, "Why are you transferring so much money around? Is everything okay?" That week, I had wired funds to set up the Singapore holding company. I had mentioned nothing. Yet she knew. It hit me then, my mother wasn't just snooping. She was monitoring. Actively, habitually, strategically. And she wasn't doing it out of care. She was doing it to calculate leverage. Which meant Christmas wasn't spontaneous outrage. It was premeditated theft. Because when she looked at those billion-dollar numbers, she didn't see my sacrifice, my work, my bloodshot nights bent over a glowing monitor. She saw a resource. Something to be redistributed. Something to be reassigned to the golden child. And the mistake she made, the fatal mistake, was leaving me the paper trail. Every timestamp. Every intrusion. Every stolen glance at a life that wasn't hers. I had lived with her snooping for decades. But now, for the first time, I had the evidence to turn it against her. Christmas wasn't just the night she tried to take my fortune. It was the night she handed me the very tools I'd used to expose her. The day after Christmas, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, blinds drawn, screen glow staining the walls, and began assembling what I came to call the ledger. Not financial statements. Not tax returns. No, this was a different kind of accounting. A record of every theft, every manipulation, every lie that had been dressed up as family sacrifice. For years, I'd stored scraps, screenshots, receipts, archived emails, even bank statements I never had the heart to throw away. They had been artifacts of frustration, tucked away into folders with vague names like miscellaneous_2016 or ref_keep. Now, under the cold clarity of betrayal, they weren't scraps. They were evidence. I started with the small things. 1998, October 12, 1907. Pizza night. Emily forgot her wallet at the arcade. I covered her $23.50 bill from the cash I earned mowing lawns. My mother called it sharing between siblings. I wrote it off as childish fairness. But it never ended. 2005, May 28, 1442. Emily crashed the Toyota Corolla my parents had co-signed for her. Deductible, $1,500. My passbook account drained. Mom's explanation, it's all family money. 2010, March 3, 8:16. Financial aid refund from my college posted, $1,200. Within 2 weeks, $900 transferred to my parents' account for household bills. A month later, Emily got a new laptop. Each entry I logged felt like sliding another weight onto a scale. Small at first. Petty even. But by the time I reached adulthood, the numbers swelled. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Loans that vanished into Emily's lifestyle. Contributions siphoned into family expenses that magically aligned with her crises. And layered across it all was the language. The lies. Words engineered to reframe theft as duty. You're so responsible, Michael. That's why we trust you. Your sister just needs a little boost. Family doesn't keep score. But I had kept score. Quietly. Subconsciously. And now, laid out in neat rows, it was undeniable. The ledger grew uglier the deeper I dug. 2016, August 14, 1622. That voicemail about my low card balance? Cross-referenced with a credit monitoring alert. My mother had signed up for email notifications linked to my student credit card, without permission. 2020, March 29, 11:48. Her text about me moving money around? The same week, a paper bank statement had arrived at their house, my childhood address, which I'd never updated. She had opened it. The envelope was missing when I visited weeks later. Snooping wasn't just habit. It was systemic. And Emily wasn't innocent. She played the role perfectly, wide-eyed, accidental beneficiary. But sprinkled through my archives were her fingerprints too. 2012, January 7, 2309. My email about studying for midterms, leaked by my mother. Emily teased me in the group chat about nerd panic. Coincidence? Hardly. 2018, November 21, 1754. Emily posted a new content setup online, studio lights, DSLR, laptop. I traced the model numbers. Exact matches to purchases made on my credit card, charges I'd been told were holiday expenses. It became clear, Emily was no passive recipient. She was complicit. Beneficiary and enabler, quietly enjoying the spoils while mom played extraction agent. By dawn, the ledger filled 146 entries. Every one time-stamped. Every one cross-referenced. Every one screaming the same truth: this wasn't family support. This was a racket. And then I noticed a pattern I hadn't seen before. Every major milestone in my life, college acceptance, first internship, startup launch, Rune's early contracts, was followed by an incident. A sudden need, a financial drain, a crisis Emily required rescuing from. It was like clockwork. Like they had tracked my momentum and made sure to redirect it before it ever turned into independence. That was the breakthrough. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't favoritism. This was design. A machine built to funnel everything through Emily, with me as the engine powering it. And Christmas? That wasn't a rupture. That was the final, inevitable demand of a system that had always assumed my success was community property. Billionaire or not, I was never meant to own what I built. Not in their eyes. I stared at the ledger, the names, the numbers, the lies stacked like bricks in a wall. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel small. I felt armed. Because if they wanted to frame this as duty, as family obligation, I was ready to show the world what obligation really looked like. A chain of trespasses. A history of theft. A case file that spoke louder than any excuse they could invent. The ledger wasn't just a record. It was the foundation of their downfall. The ledger was damning, but it wasn't airtight. A skeptic could dismiss it as coincidence, exaggeration, even paranoia. That's the thing about injustice, it thrives in the shadows of plausibility. It was just a mix-up. We thought it was family money. Emily didn't mean to. Without a smoking gun, without a piece of evidence so precise it couldn't be twisted, the case would collapse into noise. I needed one moment. One timestamp. One undeniable record that proved not just exploitation, but intent. And I found it. It started with a hunch. That bank statement from March 2020, the one that tipped my mother off about the Singapore transfers, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had never updated my mailing address after moving. The statements had still been going to my childhood home. That meant my mother had been opening them for years, quietly siphoning information without my consent. So I called the bank. Not as the son, but as the client. I asked for access logs. Every bank, no matter how family-friendly, records when accounts are accessed, online, over the phone, or in person. After 2 weeks of wrangling, after escalating from customer service to compliance, they sent me what I requested. The file was ugly. Rows of data, IP addresses, timestamps. Most logins trace back to me, my devices, my city. But sprinkled throughout were anomalies. April 11, 2018, 13:32 and 41 seconds. Login from my parents' zip code. July 3, 2019, 9:14 and 27 seconds. Login from their home IP. March 24, 2020, 15:58 and 9 seconds. Access via online banking from the exact ISP my mother used. And the smoking gun. March 29, 2020, 11:47 and 51 seconds. Access from her IP address, followed by her text at 11:48 and 23 seconds. Why are you transferring so much money around? Is everything okay? 32 seconds apart. There it was. Proof. Not assumption, not speculation. A digital fingerprint showing she had invaded my account and immediately confronted me with the stolen knowledge. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor cutting across my face, and let the weight of it settle. This wasn't family concern. This was surveillance. This was theft. And it was documented down to the second. But I didn't stop there. I dug into my cloud storage logs, the same ones that tracked every sync and every device. Christmas night, 1942 and 16 seconds, the exact moment my mother waved my financial documents in the living room, was logged as an unauthorized device access. Her phone. She had photographed the papers and uploaded them to her cloud account, not realizing my security software tracked metadata of every document copied. I cross-checked the EXIF data on the photos she had stored, snowflake-shaped ornaments reflected in the glass table, timestamp aligned perfectly with the confrontation. She hadn't just snooped. She digitized my wealth, archiving it like a trophy. This was no longer just a pattern of favoritism. This was actionable. Fraud. Data theft. Unauthorized access. The kind of thing regulators and courts don't shrug off. For hours, I pieced it together, layering the evidence like an architect drawing blueprints. Login records. Metadata trails. Screenshots of text aligned to access logs. Even her voice, captured in voicemails, echoing entitlement that now sounded less like family obligation and more like criminal confession. When the mosaic was complete, I stared at it with a kind of cold awe. For decades, they had painted me as the responsible one, the workhorse, the fixer, the silent provider. They thought that made me compliant. What they forgot was that responsibility leaves a paper trail. And I had all of it. The breakthrough wasn't just technical. It was emotional. For the first time, I knew this wouldn't be another cycle of demand and surrender. This wasn't a family spat. This was a case. And I was ready to prosecute it. Not in a courtroom, not necessarily. But in the court of truth. In the court of exposure. Where evidence speaks louder than excuses, and timestamps silence every lie. Christmas had been their ambush. This would be mine. Every move they had made up to Christmas had been about control. My silence was their leverage. My obedience was their weapon. But the moment I assembled the evidence, the dynamic inverted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to them. I was orchestrating. I knew an outright confrontation at my house wouldn't work. It would devolve into yelling, gaslighting, emotional blackmail, years of practice tactics. They would deny, reframe, weep, and retreat. No. If this was going to end, it had to happen in a way that left no room for escape. So I built a trap. First, I called Emily. My voice was steady, warm, almost apologetic. "I've been thinking about what Mom said," I told her. "About helping you. About family." Her breath caught on the other end, then turned syrupy. "Michael, that's so kind of you." I cut her off with a bait. "I'd like to meet in person. You, Mom, Dad. We'll discuss how to move forward." I chose the location carefully, a co-working space I still had access to from Rune's early days. Conference rooms with glass walls, good lighting, and, most importantly, built-in security cameras with cloud backups. No cozy living room. No fireplace glow. Just a neutral table, fluorescent lights, and microphones in every corner. Then I prepared the package. Not all the evidence, just enough to bait them. Bank statements. Access logs. The photo metadata showing my mother's phone had scanned my documents. I printed them, slid them into a plain folder, and left the last page blank except for one line: "Tell me in your own words why you did this." The day of the meeting, I arrived early. I synced the cameras, tested the audio. Every device was streaming to an encrypted drive in real time. No chance of technical difficulties. This wasn't paranoia. This was chain of custody. At 3:02 p.m., they arrived. My mother first, stiff-backed, clutching her purse like armor. Emily floated behind her, all smiles and false sweetness. My father trailed, as always, silent ballast. I started gently. "Thank you for coming," I said, sliding the folder across the table. "I've been thinking a lot about Christmas. About money. About family. Before we decide anything, I need to clear something up." My mother opened the folder. Her eyes flicked over the first page, the bank login logs, and narrowed. "What is this?" I stayed calm. "Evidence. Of unauthorized access to my accounts. Of my documents being photographed without my permission. Of my financial records being used to demand money." Emily laughed softly, too loudly. "Michael, this is ridiculous. Mom just wanted to understand what you're doing. We're family." "Family doesn't hack accounts," I said. "Family doesn't photograph private financial documents. Family doesn't extort." The word landed like a gunshot. Extort. My mother's face went pale. "How dare you?" "How dare you?" I interrupted, sliding the metadata printout forward. March 29, 2020. 11:47 and 51 seconds. Your IP address logged into my account. 11:48 and 23 seconds. You texted me about the transfer. Christmas night, 1942 and 16 seconds. You photographed my financial statements. This is not speculation. This is documented. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Emily's voice, thin and brittle: "We just thought. You have so much. It's not fair." I leaned in. "Say it again. For the record." "You thought what?" Her eyes darted to my mother. My mother shifted in her chair, lips pressed tight. "We thought you could share," Emily whispered. I pressed. "You demanded half. You threatened me with guilt, with family. You accessed my accounts. On camera, right now, tell me why." Emily started crying, the practiced kind, the quiver and sob she had perfected as a child. My mother reached to comfort her, then froze, realizing the cameras. "You can either explain it here," I said softly, "or I take this evidence to the authorities. Unauthorized access. Financial coercion. You decide." The trap snapped shut. My mother's hand trembled on the table. We just wanted to make sure Emily was taken care of," she murmured. "You don't understand what it's like." "I understand perfectly," I said. "I've understood since I was a child. But this ends today." I slid a final document across the table, an affidavit prepared by my lawyer, not a legal filing but a declaration, acknowledging the unauthorized access, renouncing any claim to my assets, agreeing to no further contact about my finances. "You sign this," I said, "and this stays between us. You don't sign, and the full file goes to my attorney. Every timestamp. Every access log. Every photo. Every theft." Silence. Then, one by one, they signed. Emily's signature was a scrawl of rage. My mother's was a claw mark. My father's was just a ghost. When it was done, I gathered the papers, slid them into my briefcase, and stood. "We're finished here," I said. "Do not contact me about money again." And then I walked out, leaving them in the sterile conference room, their reflections warped in the glass walls. It was over. Or at least, the part they could control was. Because I wasn't done. They thought a signature would erase what they'd done. But I'd built my life on records. And I had every one of theirs. And I knew exactly how to use it. When I left the co-working space that day, briefcase in hand, the cold January air hit my face like a baptism. For the first time in decades, I felt light, not happy, not triumphant, but unshackled. Yet as I walked to my car, I knew the signatures weren't the end. They were only the beginning. A signature doesn't erase a crime. It just marks the moment someone realizes they've been caught. And my mother and Emily had been caught, fully, irrevocably. I could have left it there. Kept my billion-dollar secret, built a higher wall, vanished from their orbit. But the more I stared at the evidence, the access logs, the photo metadata, the ledger of lies, the more one thought gnawed at me. How many other people had they done this to? My mother had always been a master manipulator. Emily had always been a skilled beneficiary. I wasn't their first target. I was just their biggest. If I stayed silent, I wasn't protecting myself. I was enabling them. So I made a decision. I wouldn't press criminal charges, not yet. But I would bring the truth into the open. Not as gossip. Not as a messy family drama. As a documented case of financial coercion, digital intrusion, and entitlement at scale. I chose my vector carefully. A journalist named Priya Rao had covered Rune in its early days, back when we were just a scrappy startup. She'd since moved into investigative reporting, specializing in digital privacy and financial exploitation. Her articles had toppled small scams, exposed elder abuse rings, and won her 2 national awards. If anyone could handle my story with rigor, it was her. I reached out through her encrypted tip line, sending only a fragment. I have evidence of a decade-long pattern of unauthorized access and financial coercion by close relatives. Timestamps, logs, metadata. Willing to provide proof. She replied within hours. Meet? 2 days later, we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. I slid a drive across the table. She plugged it into her laptop, eyes scanning the first folder, /evidence. Login logs. Voicemails. Bank statements. Photos with EXIF data. A subfolder labeled ledger. She looked up at me. This is. She began, then stopped. This is meticulous. This is casework, not just a story. I nodded. I built my company on records. I know chain of custody. Everything here is timestamped, cross-referenced. They can't say it's fake. They can't say it's exaggerated. Priya leaned back. You're not just blowing the whistle. You're detonating a bomb. I said nothing. Over the next month, Priya and her legal team verified everything. They called banks, traced IPs, cross-checked device IDs, even subpoenaed my mother's phone records with my consent to compare timestamps. Each verification came back clean. Each claim solid. Finally, she called me. We're ready to publish, she said. But once this runs, it's public. There's no pulling it back. You understand that? I do. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning at 8:03. Headline: Billionaire tech founder documents years of family financial coercion and digital intrusion. It wasn't salacious. It wasn't clickbait. It was surgical. Screenshots of the login logs, side by side with my mother's texts. Photos of my documents with her phone's EXIF data stamped like a confession. The ledger laid out like a crime map, each incident plotted over time. The reaction was immediate. Not just from readers, but from professionals. Privacy advocates called it a landmark case. Financial forums dissected it as a textbook example of coercive control. Even legal analysts weighed in, noting that the evidence could meet the threshold for multiple charges. And then came the ripple effect. Old acquaintances emailed me stories. Former neighbors, distant relatives, even Emily's ex-boyfriend, they all described small loans that had never been repaid, favors that felt like demands, family support that left them drained. My mother's pattern, writ large. I didn't respond publicly. Priya handled the press inquiries. I stayed quiet, watching from my apartment as the narrative shifted. My mother and Emily had always painted themselves as caretakers, victims, deserving. Now the world saw the pattern for what it was. My mother tried to fight back, posted a rambling Facebook status about misunderstandings and private family matters. But the screenshots made her claims collapse. Emily tried to pivot, deleting old posts, scrubbing her Instagram, even issuing a statement about moving forward. It didn't matter. The timestamps were immortal. For the first time, they weren't in control of the story. I was. And as the public digested what they'd done, I began planning the final move. Because exposure wasn't enough. Not for a lifetime of theft disguised as love. Justice had to be more than truth. It had to be irreversible. The morning after Priya's article dropped, I woke up to a phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. Missed calls, unread texts, voicemails stacked like bricks. My mother. Emily. Even my father, though his messages were always the same: call your mother. I didn't. Instead, I opened my email. Dozens of subject lines lit the screen: interview request, legal inquiry, support for your story. Lawyers offering to represent me if I pressed charges. Advocacy groups praising the courage of exposure. Strangers sharing their own scars of financial abuse. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a mirror for thousands. But my mother and Emily weren't just silent casualties. They were unraveling in real time. Emily's brand imploded within 48 hours. Sponsors pulled out, followers abandoned her, old screenshots resurfaced, posts flaunting luxuries she hadn't earned, paid for with money siphoned from me. She tried to backpedal, posting a teary video about healing and forgiveness. The comments shredded her. Forgiveness doesn't erase theft. Healing isn't funded by fraud. My mother fared worse. Local news picked up Priya's article. Her neighbors whispered. Her church leadership quietly stripped her from committees. The woman who had built her identity on appearances, on being the respectable matriarch, found herself radioactive. And me? I stayed silent. That silence was deliberate. For decades, I had been forced to explain myself, justify, placate. Now, every question sent my way was answered by the evidence. Every doubt silenced by timestamps. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to argue. The truth spoke louder than I ever could. Still, there was one last thing to do. I met with Priya again, not at a cafe this time, but in her office. I handed her a second drive. Inside, the full ledger. All 146 entries. Not just the evidence that had already been published, but everything. The pizza night. The car deductible. The laptop. Every manipulation, every theft, every timestamp stretching back decades. I don't want this buried with me, I said. I want it archived. Documented. A case study. She nodded, her eyes sharp. This isn't just a story anymore. It's a record. And that's what it became. Universities cited it in courses on digital ethics. Advocacy groups used it in campaigns against financial abuse. Even corporate compliance officers referenced it as a model of how records expose patterns. My family's betrayal had transformed into something bigger, a warning system. A beacon. The irony didn't escape me. The very thing my mother had used against me, snooping, monitoring, records, was the thing that destroyed her. As for Emily and my mother, they never recovered. Not socially. Not financially. Their reputations collapsed under the weight of their own actions. My father faded into quiet obscurity, as he always had, never lifting a hand to fight or protect. And me? I built higher walls, yes. But I also built clarity. I no longer carried the secret like contraband. I carried it like armor. Because now, the world knew the truth. Christmas had begun as their ambush. But it ended as mine. And when I finally closed the ledger, one last line burned in my mind, sharp as glass. They tried to steal my fortune. But in the end, I stole back my freedom.